Hello and welcome. Thank you for watching my video. I would love to share something with you that's really deep and true to my heart. But it has to do with pain, anxiety, anxiousness. 20 years ago, I married my beautiful wife, Tomoko Ota. But it didn't last very long. And why didn't it last very long? Because we both had pain. And so the story goes, I lived on my family farm in South Langley. And my wife Tomoko was living on a homestay farm near our house. But she wasn't very happy. But she came and visited our farm. And I made a fabulous lunch. I created this massive amount of food because I love food. But I also loved alcohol. I also loved marijuana. And why did we connect? Really quickly. Because we both had pain. Well, I had a lot of pain. And what I found out later was she had a lot of family trauma. That really resonated with me because I had a lot of family trauma as well. You know, through that whole courtship, when she was here for 3 months. But the first week when I met her, she wasn't happy where she was living at this other farm. So I suggested, well, you know what? You can come and live at our farm. But there was a hidden message behind there because I had already fallen in love with her, even the first day I met her. But what I did fall in love with was her pain, her anxiousness, her anger, because that's what I had. You know, I asked her to marry me probably about 2 months later. And she said no. Yeah, she said no. And then I asked her again. And she asked me this question, why do you want to marry me? And my question is, because I love you. Because I care for you. And she still said no. Because the true reason was something different. I was seeking, because I was a single father of my older boy. So I was seeking out a replacement mother. Because my son didn't have a mother at the time. So subconsciously, I had a different plan. So what happened was, I asked her a 4th time. And then again a 5th time. By the 5th time, I wore her out. And she finally said yes. So we had this long distance courtship from Canada and Japan. You know, me traveling to Japan. But how I bought my ticket was through my MasterCard. So I racked up my MasterCard. That was the only way that I knew how to be with her. Because the attraction towards pain and anxiousness in her life is what drove me there. Because I was seeking something more, excitement. So through that time, back and forth, traveling back and forth, we finally got married the following year. A traditional Japanese wedding with kimonos, both of us wearing it. But if you see those pictures of both of us, I was happy because I was getting what I wanted. But she wasn't happy because she was making somebody else happy, means her father. Not the best way to collaborate a relationship, to join in matrimony. So what we did, I flew back and she stayed there. But I was so angry with that fact. Because like, why am I traveling back with my wife in Japan? Because I was so controlling. I wanted her here now. Because I needed somebody to care for my son. Not for me, but for somebody else. So when I went back again, then finally she came to Canada. But then she got pregnant. And she started a job in Canada that she didn't like. Then she found out that her father was very sick with cancer. Very traumatic. So she flew back. And I was so upset the fact that she was going to her sick father. Because in my mind, she's now my wife. I mean, so controlling I was. So she went back. And before our son was born, her father passed away. And then a few months later, she had our son. And she never came back to Canada. But I went and traveled to Japan when my son was very small, 4 months old. And this little beautiful little boy in my hands, but I still didn't want to commit because she wanted me to move to Japan. And I made an excuse. Oh, I'm going to go back and prepare because she wanted me to live in Japan. So I said, okay. And so I changed my ticket to fly back. And the reason why I wanted to change my ticket, because I felt trapped. And also I wanted to drink and I wanted to smoke marijuana. So a long period went back and forth, arguing, me blocking, me ignoring her. It was fully dramatic. But that's what I loved. I love that dramatic. I love that pain and anxiousness in my life because I got to receive something. She's going to chase me. So finally, when my son was 2 years old, they flew to Canada around his birthday. It was his second birthday. So we got to spend some time, and he didn't speak any English. He was only speaking Japanese at the time. So we had a great time. They stayed for about 3 months. Then they flew back again. And I was so depressed because they were here and then they were gone again. I kept on getting and then losing, getting and then losing. That was the typical pattern that I was living in. I always get something and then I would lose it. Then almost a year later, we hadn't communicated much, a little bit on Skype. Then finally, she came to Canada, but I didn't even know because I was too drunk to even realize it. And then they were put in jail at the airport, both of them. You know, he's 4 years old, and within 24 hours, they were sent back to Japan. The U.S., or the Canadian Border Patrol had said they were coming to Canada illegally. So they sent him back. Then time went on again, and she was wondering where I was, what happened. I didn't care, because I only cared about myself. Then this process, we really wanted to come to Canada. I really wanted them to come to Canada. So I did all I could. It wasn't very much, but I did what I had to do. So they came back again when he was about 5.5 years old. So this is almost 5 year stretch from when he was born. So they came here and he loved it. He loved Canada. I enrolled him in school because they were going to stay for 3 months. It was perfect timing. And he wanted to stay in Canada. I was like, perfect. I get what I want. He got what he wanted. But Tomoko didn't get what she wanted. But she did for him. So we got remarried. That was the only way that they can stay in Canada, if we got remarried again. Because for her, the only way to stay in Canada was to get a PR card and for us to get remarried again. But it was a marriage without love. So we were living on our family farm, and I was so controlling. I was drinking every day. I was growing marijuana just to make ends meet. Means I was selling it. So throughout this whole process, I really was stuck. I felt trapped again. So I started to become very verbally abusive, emotionally abusive towards her. Because I didn't get what I wanted. For example, I didn't get sex because we slept in separate areas of the house. So what happened next? I came home one day, they were gone. They went to a homeless shelter, I found out a few weeks later, for abused women here in Langley. And it took a friend of hers to phone me and connect with me because I was searching where she was. And we had a sort of mediated meeting because she needed a place to stay because she was only 30 days in that transitional house. So I agreed on paying rent. So I paid. She got a room, so a coach house. And then I started to visit this, so they got moved in. And so I started to visit them more and more and more. And throughout that time, I really started to just a little bit think about them. Just a little bit, because I was so selfish. So through that process, and this was quite a few years ago. Just imagine, he's 18 now, so when he was about 6 years old. So I would go to their house, go back to my farm with my older boy, and go back and forth until it was almost like a year later, where I started to say, you know what, I think we can start to really work this out. So we started to talk and communicate, but it didn't work. We were arguing all the time, but during this period, we needed to get her PR card. So we had an interview with Immigration Canada, because it took us such a long period of time, because she was actually blacklisted in Canada. There was a blacklist or a check mark, whatever it was, in her name. So we had to go for an interview. So we actually had to practice. Yes, practice to see what she liked and what I liked. What was the last movie we saw? All these different things. We had to sit down and talk to each other. So then we went to an interview down in Vancouver. Oh, thank goodness everything went well. We answered the same questions and we were right, because we practiced. But after that, we started to really spend some more time together. I was staying overnight. I started to coaching because he wanted to play soccer. I started coaching soccer. And we started to communicate much better. Then in 2009, my son wanted to go back and visit. But Tomoko couldn't leave because she was waiting for a PR card. So he went back to Japan to visit his family. So when he was in Japan, this was around Christmas time. So he was enjoying himself. Then it was New Year's Eve. So this is a very dramatic situation. He's in Japan. My wife's here in Canada. So on New Year's Eve, I decided, you know what, I'm going to have dinner. And we're going to have some fun, drink some wine. So we started off, great night. I cooked some great dinner. And then all of a sudden, it came to about 10 minutes to midnight. She started to get really drunk. I was drunk. All of a sudden, she went to bed. Yes, we did have sex. Then she said she was not feeling very well, so she went to bed. So I went into the room about 5 minutes to midnight. And then I went to lay down. And not even 30 seconds later, I looked over and she looked so white as a ghost, pale. And I looked over her and she stopped breathing. I was in absolute panic mode. I started shaking her and she didn't move, nothing, zero. So I picked her up and I put her in the shower and I made her throw up. It was such an emotional time. But I didn't want to phone 911 because I had such a fear of money. Oh, I'm going to have to pay for her because she has no medical. I'm going to have to pay for the ambulance, the hospital stay. All these negative thoughts came into my mind. So all of a sudden, I just picked her up. I got her back to, and I did CPR on her, brought her back to life. But she couldn't talk. She was lifeless still. But she was breathing. So I picked her up and I walked her outside, down the stairs, into the car, and I drove her to the hospital. They did a whole bunch of scans, CAT scans, to find out, some brain scans, to find out what was going on. But they couldn't find out what was going on. So this whole healing process after they released her was in the next morning. So we went back and forth to doctors. No one could find out what was going on. It took about 3 weeks to really start for her to start talking again, start walking again. Such a dramatic situation. Meanwhile, our son's in Japan. He has no idea what's going on. So he comes back, but she's still not 100%. And now, this is already the 3rd week in January. So here I was going to work, coming back and looking after her, and driving my son to school. But all of a sudden, it started to slowly disappear. And we started to really work on our relationship a bit more. So we traveled back and forth to Japan. We did that almost every year after that. And we really started to work on our feelings. And she started to write this blog that I had no idea she was writing. And she was writing about her life and how bad I was, about her feelings. It really helped her release some of those thoughts and feelings within herself. But she had a different way of thinking. And she had a really sort of a epiphany about life. And all of a sudden this shift and change in her, I wasn't sure why, but she thanked me. She thanked me for being me. And I had tears coming from my eyes. And I didn't know why she was thanking me. Why is she thanking me? I'm not a nice person. I'm so controlling. All of a sudden I had such an emotional feeling come over me. And we started to really talk more. But I was still fighting that. Because one of those things that I didn't like doing was sharing my thoughts and feelings. But I really started to edge toward sharing much more. So sharing and sharing continuously. So for about 5 years, we started to really communicate better. We started to talk more about our feelings and about her feelings. But I was still drinking alcohol and still smoking marijuana. Up until about 5 years ago with marijuana and cigarettes. And I stopped those around 5 years ago. And it's just over 3.5 years ago now for alcohol. And my thought patterns have changed, the way I think about her and I think about myself. Am I 100%? No, but I'm on the path to creating much more clarity in my life. Because all this negativity and alcohol and drugs and everything that was in my system, most of it was negativity because I was hiding all my pains. You know, to this day, we go for walks and we enjoy our life. But we really we talk about our thoughts and feelings. This is very important for ourselves, for our own well-being, is to communicate our feelings. So my whole point of this video is that life isn't always what it appears to be. No, you can have a life of joy and prosperity and abundance, but if we stay in our negativity and live in this pity party or Ain't It Awful Club, whatever it may be in our lives that's holding us back, because the only person that held me back was me. The only person that held Tomoko back was Tomoko. And I often say, the only person that can make ourselves happy is ourselves. So hopefully you really enjoyed watching and listening to me talk about my life story a little bit for the last 20 years. So moving forward, I'm always in that mindfulness of seeing who I am, even though it may be painful at times. Always moving forward, never backwards, and living in the present moment. So thank you for watching my video and have a fabulous day. Bye-bye.